mental point of origin to where it's like, if you tell me something, if I've never experienced it or if I've never seen it, then it's not real or it's not relevant or it's not important. And then I begin to project my worldview onto you.
Oh,
And
I like that, Shane.
I'm like, I know I'm not crazy. Like they make you feel so nuts. Like they make like I know I just seen what I seen, and I and I understand that like sometimes people can read into things a little bit further, but a little bit more. But if you're not the only person that has brought this to this person's attention, and like everybody else could see it but them, and then they try to make everybody else around them feel like they're crazy for bringing it up,
that's solid.
whatever the thing may be. Most of the time it's behavior that's brought up, and it's like, and I understand that mental health runs deep for some people, and sometimes it could be hard for people to see things because of their mental health. But in another breath, it's like, I don't really know if that's mental health. I just think you're just trying to get over. Like,
man, I struggle with that.
Sometimes that is the case because, let's face it, people are people, and sometimes people have a very difficult time taking themselves out of the equation, and they have to look at things from the way they see it instead of first being objective and then being empathetic. You know what I mean? And then try to see things from another person's perspective to get a better understanding of what's being said. Because if you always look at things from only your perspective, you're only going to understand what you know.
Right.
I guess it's a fine line of people knowing what they're doing and then really honestly just being ignorant to this new wave of self-awareness and emotional and mental psychological abuse, because these things weren't things. There was a time when people didn't study this stuff, people didn't pay attention. These weren't things. You better go sit down and brush it off and get some tough skin, like.
And then what do you do if you can't develop that tough skin? Now you got to live with this emotional and mental damage.
You know what I mean?
And there's nobody to help you through it because no one cared enough to figure out what it was.
Right.
So we talked about I know me and my family talk a lot about, me and my mom specifically talk a lot about like sociopaths. Anybody got access to the internet? They can read the definition of sociopath for the people.
Sociopath. Hold on.
I'll look it up. I can.
The other person can look up psychopath.
They have a sociopath versus psychopath.
All right.
The difference between sociopath and a psychopath. Do you want me to read the differences between?
Sure, why not?
Oh, go ahead. You want me to say?
Well, Shane, while she's looking that up, can you look up narcissism and ego?
Okay.
While I just sit here and watch y'all.
Okay, narcissism, it's a personality disorder. How it comes about, I mean, it can develop in a lot of different ways. But it's an overinflated infatuation with oneself, self-importance. And this self-importance can be so large to where it also has an adverse effect to their ego, like you had mentioned before. So a person can think that they are just the best thing out there and no one is better than them. But if something challenges their worldview to where they have even just a little bit of doubt, it's like the worst mental and emotional pain that person could feel. You know what I mean? But it comes back to it's all about them. They're aware of how they feel about everything, but they are not in touch with the feelings or emotions with anybody around them. It doesn't compute. It doesn't even enter their mind. They don't even care.
So when I was looking here, it says that sociopaths are hot-headed. They act without thinking how others will be affected, where psychopaths are more cold-hearted and calculating. They are carefully plot their moves and use aggression in a planned out way to get what they want.
Passive aggressiveness.
That's
Right.
evil.
Right.
So
So
the psychopath is planning the evil and the violence and the
right, where the sociopath just does without
They,
thinking of
impulsive.
yes.
it's autopilot for the most part. It's like they just pretty much, just my opinion, but I think like narcissistic people and sociopaths are pretty much on the same wavelength.
I did some research on the difference between a narcissist and a sociopath, and they said I think it was ego. I think ego was the thing that that
Between
different
what?
or the motivation. The
For
motivation for why they're doing what they're doing is different.
Right.
Because they said
So
something about the narcissist wants to always, they want to do it, I guess, for themselves or to get fandemonium, maybe.
It's it's like a high for them. You know what I mean? So
For the
like
narcissist or the sociopath.
the
for
narcissist,
the narcissist, the sociopath doesn't really care one way or the other. They just do what they do.
they do it for them. It's to satisfy them. Where narcissists, they'll do it for them, but they will also do it for the clout.
Mm-hmm.
So it's saying here that psychopaths and sociopaths share a similar set of traits. People like to have a poor inner sense of right or wrong. Like this have a poor sense of right or wrong. They also cannot seem to understand or share other person's feelings, but there are some differences too. So the key difference between a psychopath and a sociopath is whether he or she has a conscience, the little voice inside that lets you know when you are doing something wrong. And it says psychopaths don't have a conscience. If he lies to you, he can steal your money and he won't feel any remorse about it. Where a sociopath typically has a conscience, but it's weak. They may know that taking your money is wrong, but they might feel some type of guilt or remorse, but
After
it
the
won't
fact.
stop their behavior.
That's very close.
Very close.
Have any of you guys ran into a narcissist? Start there.
Girl.
Yeah.
Lack of empathy and the ability to stand in somebody else's shoes and understand how they feel.
I mean,
similarity.
Like I've learned to identify when I'm faced with a narcissist. I mean, after dealing with some of them, but one thing is with a narcissist, it's like they don't really have any original thought. They copy and they mimic other people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and plus they're very self-sabotaging too. It's like they can't get out of their own way, and I think that's part of why they copy other people, because they can't find their own original way to get anywhere in life. You know what I mean?
They're annoying.
Yeah, and one thing is they do this weird thing to where they just have this blank stare. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but it's
I don't know
like,
if I've ever witnessed that, but now that you mentioned it, I'm gonna pay attention to that.
yeah, it's like they just have this stare like there's nobody home, You know what I mean? But at the same time, usually when they're having that stare, there's some things cooking upstairs of where they're just thinking about the next thing that they're going to do to get their narcissistic supply, or how they're going to feed off of whoever their source is. Because there's things that narcissists do, when they target somebody. They can, endear themselves to someone by a lot, you know what I mean? And they'll play little mind games to where it's like one moment they're like, they treat that person like they're going to be their best friend or whatever, and then the next moment they go through this discard phase to where it's like they just throw this person.
They're done with you, they're on to the next person to make them feel important.
But that's just the act, because they want the reaction of the emotional abuse, you know what I mean? And when they see that, they kind of get this high off of it, and then they just kind of repeat the cycle as needed.
Yeah.
I mean, narcissists really don't typically move on until either A, the person that they're getting their supply off of is completely destroyed, or if the person that is the victim of the narcissist eventually just moves on and cuts that person off cold turkey. Then they know, okay, I can't tap this person anymore. Let me go find another victim.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot. I mean, like, I typically can like pick out that narcissist person, that person who's very self-absorbed. And I kind of like, there's a type of people that I just flock away from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just can't do people like that the ones that are always looking for that center of attention type thing, and they're always like, oh, I can't.
Yeah.
So typically try to be away from them type of people.
Just run.
Right. Right.
I looked up some more traits. They tend to be conversation hoarders.
So I was just in there reading like the whole narcissist.
Yeah, you can read it.
So like their traits are rule breaker, boundary violator, false image, projection, entitlement, charmer, conversation interrupter, conversation hoarder. The narcissist love to talk about him or herself and don't, give a chance to take like for a two-way conversation. It's always all about them.
Yeah.
And they kind of like turn everything into them. Like, have you ever had like a moment where you were sitting there and you needed somebody to talk to? So like, you call one of your friends or you call somebody and you're just kind of like want to vent and talk. And then the whole conversation turns into them and their problem. And you're like, and you don't want to feel like you're a horrible person for not listening to them. And you are listening to them, but it's like, bruh, I called to talk to you and you took over the whole conversation, and like
it never swings back.
Yeah.
It never swings back to you or what you had going on. It just that gets lost in the shadows.
Mm-hmm. Another one too. I mean that false image projection. That's a big one, because when a narcissist targets an individual, they begin to do this thing to where they could turn all your friends and family against you by making them seem like the good person, and then the victim is the one that actually has the problem.
Right. It's wild. I personally like these people. These type of people are very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like they're not like you just throw them away. Like we all have that one friend. And what's crazy? What else they say though? This is typically a trait of men.
Could be.
Well, no, I'm just reading with like what it says on here, like narcissists.
From where you found it.
Huh?
I'm sorry. Say it again. You reading it from where?
Google.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think narcissism. I mean, because there's two types of narcissism. There's overt and covert. That could be a trait of anybody. You know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, they're not saying they're just saying that it's typically it's more common in men.
That could be.
I can see that in some ways, only because, and I'm thinking like men are more athletic, and they're more into like competing, and so in that you have to have this grandiose kind of mentality. I think it doesn't have to be braggadocious, but I think oftentimes it is. And so I can see men being in a position where they have to talk themselves up. They have to think of themselves first. They have to put themselves first in order to be the greatest in these kind of situations, if that makes sense. Where women are taught to be more like nurturing. So we're taught to usually, and I'm speaking generally, usually taught to be more humble. So we have to humble down in order to be nurturers or to take care of our future kids, or we're taught to be more meek and modest in general, when men are taught to be more like, ha, look at me, I'm the greatest, I'm the best.
Yeah. Those are good examples. Yeah, I think it really starts with the atmosphere that the person is in, because I don't think a lot of people set out to become narcissists. You know, I think some of them become narcissists because, like, say if you have a person that grows up in a household where everybody is antagonizing and emotionally and mentally abusive to each other all the time, then that disorder can actually manifest itself. You know,
do you think there are narcissistic moments in a person's world?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking like,
I think everybody has a little bit of narcissist in them, and it comes out in different points in time. And I'm not saying this in like like narcissist, it's like a bad, but I think it becomes a bad thing when it overtakes and overpowers your life. It becomes your mission in life to outdo everybody that you come in contact with. So I think I think we've all had our own narcissistic moments, if that makes sense. Where we kind of boasted and made ourselves above, whether, and I think a lot of it is phases of life. Like, you don't see rarely, and I'll speak to even like, some of the wealthy people that I know. Like, you don't hear older, like rich people or wealthy people like kind of talk about their money and talk about who they are and their powers and their this and their that. You don't hear people like that talk about that like that. You hear these young kids always feeling like they have to like project who they are. They're in that phase of life of where they have to like let people know who they are, what they got, how they got it, what they have, stuff like that, where,
not just projected too, but really, really push that image like, okay, this is who I am and you can't challenge it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I that's why I say, like, I feel like it's also in phases of life.
Right.
Like, and maybe that's just me, but I'm just speaking to what I see. Like, I've never seen that.
I think those phases is more ego than it is like real narcissism. Like real narcissism, that's just what that person is. You know what I mean? Like, I'll give an example. Like, a narcissist will blame a person for what they're doing. you know, like say if you got one person accusing another person of cheating, meanwhile they're the one that's actually cheating.
Mm-hmm.
I think wouldn't that be more like a sociopath though?
Possibly.
I was thinking of narcissistic moment, like for instance, I think like when you're in your teens or early 20s, and there's a little bit of an inability to consider others unless you've been taught to. You're in a kind of narcissistic space in your life. Not all, obviously, not all teens, but
I put them more in like a sociopath type of realm.
I see that kind of behavior in a lot of these sitcoms, to where like the kids is like, I was watching what was it called? Madam Secretary. It's a pretty good show. And it's about this lady. She is, you know, the Secretary of Defense, right? And her husband works for the NSA. Both of them have jobs that they can't actually talk about. Meanwhile, their kids are the most spoiled brats on the planet, because they want to whine and complain when their parents can't do this and can't do that. And, you know, meanwhile, these people are trying to hold back the fate of the free world from falling apart each and every day.
And the kids don't know what they're doing?
Yeah, no, the kids don't know what they're doing. And then, and the thing is, just like when the kids start to get a whiff of what they're doing, now they want to criticize their parents. You know, it's like the one daughter was so entitled that she kind of looked down on her mother for taking part in torture, you know, not knowing the details of what happened during that classified mission. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you could look at torture as something like highly unethical. And I mean, if you want to look through the lens of, you know, torture is just ethically wrong, you know, it's like, okay, why is this person being tortured? Is this to prevent the death of millions? What do you do? You know what I mean? I mean, what did this person do to deserve being tortured? I mean, come to find out, you know, the guy that got tortured did kill a lot of people. And was about to kill a whole lot more. But it's like when children don't have a point of reference of yeah, I think that's what it is. They just don't have a point of reference. Their sight is just very limited. They don't see the big picture.
I think a lot of it just has to do with like their inexperience of life. Because I mean, I think we've all have had those moments where we have looked at an adult that's older than us, and we have found out some of the things that they have done in their life, and we kind of quickly judge. But then when we're met with something now that we're older, and it's like, oh, I get where so-and-so was coming from at that point. Because now we have a sense of life and we understand a little bit more.
Yeah, the generations can be tricky too, because it's like, say, when parents raise kids and they're going off of the framework of how they're raised. A lot of times what's not taken into account is the world that the children are entering is a whole brand new world.
Yeah, like this day and age, it's cool to be narcissistic. It's cool to be a sociopath. You get more likes, more clout, more followers, all that stuff when you are those things. And I think about career too, because I mentioned athletics earlier, but you know, even being an entertainer, that's a world where, like I said, it's cool, or it's better to be more of a narcissistic type of individual. Like Like I'm faced with that in my singing business. Like I have to be promoting myself constantly, telling people what I'm doing, posting it all the time, interjecting with my business card, and you know, it's a fine line.
Yeah, it's marketing almost. But I agree with what you're saying, because it kind of reminded me, this happened a long time ago. And I think this was talked about on a show kind of like TMZ. It was about Britney Spears when, when she was in, in her prime, about how um, she was at some hotel that she had rented out, and I guess the room wasn't set up exactly, the main suite wasn't set up exactly how she wanted, and like a bunch of people lost their jobs behind it over something petty, like, all the red M&Ms was not taken out of the bowl, or you know what I mean.
Oh God. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
don't think a lot of people have found that balance or even care to.
I can't imagine being so
It's
rich.
because it was accepted. It's acceptable.
Mhm.
In
And
that arena, it absolutely is.
right. So when you have something that is accepted and not challenged, of course, it's going to continue, and it's going to be okay for it to continue.
Yeah.
Because there's no consequences.
Right.
Nope.
It's
Nobody's
not even,
challenging
it doesn't
it.
ever necessarily, I mean, I guess you can consider like not having followers or not having people around as like a consequence. Excuse me, but you can't be a narcissist if people don't follow you or look up to you or admire you or see you as being something great. You can't be a narcissist, because at that point there's nobody to displease.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean?
The feet off
Yeah.
at that point.
So it's like those type of people need to have some type of acceptance.
Yeah. They need to be looked up to. They can't be them without that crowd.
Mhm.
Yep.
So then what about the sociopath? We did a little focusing on the narcissist. What about the sociopath? Have either of you ran into the sociopath? I know for sure I have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, what was your perspective on that? Like, what was your experience when you ran into the sociopath?
I was dating a sociopath.
Oh.
To elaborate.
I will. Just know, like you said, the consciousness of whether you're hurting a person, you don't even notice it. You don't even take it in. Or maybe you take it in, but you take it in much later after the damage is done. It's not as calculated as the psychopath, but is you're just behaving, I guess, erratically, and you're hurting feelings as you go along. And yeah, definitely dated a couple sociopaths in my day. Definitely.
What about you?
Me? I don't know. I think the person I was with was kind of a lot of those things rolled up into one.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say that.
Big time. I was gonna go to the psychopath separately, but I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the psychopath part didn't pop up until they felt like they were emboldened to reinforce the wrong that they know they did. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like, yeah, I did this and here's why.
Mm-hmm. And then they think
Other
that
than
here's
that,
why is enough.
yeah. Other than that, everything else was covert, Everything
Yeah.
else was really covert. And the thing about the narcissist that I'm not sure a lot of people know is you don't readily recognize a narcissist because the things that they do is so under the radar compared to someone that you can catch trying to get over. You know what I mean?
Yep. It says that they are charming.
Yeah.
It's so under.
So it takes much longer to even identify.
It can take years to identify if you don't know what to look for. I mean, if you're not educated on a topic, you could be with a narcissist for a few years and before, and you start to realize it after, you know, it affects your health and your mental well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to